This clip is from my conversation with David Porter, a former Army Ranger and current ServiceNow executive whose path from the military to tech is full of hard-earned lessons on failure, resilience, and finding direction.
We're all standing there at the very end, and they go, and there's newspapers and radios there, and they go, and the Iron Warrior is David Porter. Like, I beat everybody. Like, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I was like stunned, like, I won the whole thing, right? And at that point, I was all of that worked out. It's way too much. And so I was really fit because I knew I was going into selection. I thought, like, I got to get as fit as I can. So it's just have it. Here, the old guy, the 25-year-old or whatever, I was at the time, like, I won the thing. And so they tell me to come up, and I'm like, I wasn't even listening. I was just like looking at the waves or something like that. And people are like, "Hey, man, that's you." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I run up there. There's the news is there, everything. And the three people who are going to give me my award are the three people who told me not to ever be in. That should not join the military. They're the ones that are handing me the awards. And I remember I walked up there and I got all this. I had all this stuff, and the surfboard. They gave me you want a surfboard, and I remember, like, they go through it, and I remember me, and then they said, "Well, turn around and hold your plaque up and your surfboard with them for a newspaper." And I just walked off the stage. That was probably not the right thing to do. Like, it was a little bit of a poke in the eye, but that was like, I was dumb. I was young and dumb, but it was my only way to get back.
Bold move.
It was a bold move. Yeah, I just pretended I didn't hear them.
That's awesome. Yeah, it probably felt a little bit good at the moment, right? I mean, you're just like, these guys that probably felt really personal, man, when they're just you're not even fit to join.
Those failures, right? Like, I'm not even going to call it a failure, but that turn of events would have changed my life if I would have gone as an officer. I don't know where that path or that decision node would go, but I certainly know I wouldn't be here right now where I am today. I would almost with certainty, I would say, which I can't probabilistically, like, say that I couldn't be here, but it would be the chance would be very low, extremely low, to where I'm at today. Right. And so I graduated with my MBA, and 2.5 weeks later, I got shipped off to boot camp in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Wild. That's an amazing story, man. Yeah. There are a couple of things that stand out so far that we've been talking about before we go to the next spot here. It seems like you have, like, an ability or just something within you to kind of see a chapter in your growth, development, or whatever, and just be like, okay, that chapter's done, and now I'm moving on. And you talked about, there's this time in my life when I was surfing and living on the beach, and then that chapter was over, and then I'm going to move on. I'm going to go to Hawaii, and then that chapter's over, and I'm going to come. Like, I think, I don't know. I think that's kind of unique. I don't know. I can't speak for anyone else except myself, but I, like, frankly, have a hard time moving on with different chapters. I kind of want to hang on to these places that are comfortable, because it'd be really easy to be like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I'm living on the beach, or, I'm working at this ranch and it's decent and my needs are met. And, like, I don't know. Is there something to that? Like, knowing when a chapter is done and then when it's time to kind of move on?
I wish I had an answer. These are the criteria for me for my exit strategy, right? But I don't think that's not how I approach it. I mean, there's a couple things, I guess I'll unpack that. One of my mantras for me is, like, I am going to do something regardless of what it is until I'm not having fun doing it anymore. And then I'm going to change directions and find the next thing that is bringing me value and utility in my life. Right. It's not a perfect science, but I do believe life is short. There's a really big cost associated with leaving this comfortable area I have right here. Scares me a little bit, because it should. Because if your needs are met, Maslow tells you that you probably are in a good place, and, like, you're going up the pyramid, and, like, why change that? Changing that induces risk into the system, and when there's risk in the system, the future is unknown, and it's hard for us to think about how you think more about the unknown outcomes, and so it fogs the decision point in the present, right? And that's good. I don't think that's a bad thing. However, people swing it too far to the left, right? Because I may not be happy at my job, but it pays pretty well. And, I have good insurance. We like where we live. If that startup that, I kind of like drawn to, if I go do that, like, look at all the risk and stuff, there is nothing that has a greater cost, in my opinion, of being 20 years later, looking back going, like, damn it, why didn't I try that? Because, and that's me. I'm not saying everybody's like that. right? And it's not like I go like run to anything that like seems unusually or a little uncomfortable. Especially as you get older, you have kids and stuff like that. There's other calculus in play, right? But I also think like for every success I've probably had in my life, I've probably had 100 failures or something close to that, right? I go back, like I've made a lot of dumb decisions, but those dumb decisions have like I go back. You don't know. We're not good about knowing what we want to be when we grow up, but we're really good about knowing what we don't want to be. And I found when I wrote down, because I was laughing with my sister and a couple of my friends, we were talking about like you may have had more jobs than any human on the planet I've known, so I did it like I did a little equation
That's a good amount of jobs, man.
from a paper boy, worked at Taco Bell for 6 months, worked at JC Penney's. I was a valet person. I sold Pitney Bowes. I sold point of sale systems. Like, I'd almost be embarrassed, right? But I'm not, because I took a lot of stuff out of the system that I learned I didn't like. And as I got older and I started to get more mature in my thinking, not that I'm there yet, I'm still kind of like a 16-year-old boy sometimes in my head, but it helped me decide like yeah, don't want to do that, don't want to do that. But it also taught me like a lot about relationships, and like I've screwed some of those over. Working at a pancake house, I threw butter on someone, got fired. Don't do that, it's not good. Stuff like that. And so yeah, it's but I do believe that when you decide that you want to move or you're thinking about it, like you got to get to a place real quick, and you can't push that down in your mind, because your brain, either you're having those thoughts for a reason, right? And everybody's reason is different. Sometimes people actually are looking for increase in power and stature. Some people are looking for an increase in responsibility and new challenges. Some people want to get the hell away from the people they're working with. There's a million reasons why you're underutilized, or maybe you're over your skis and you're like, wow, I'd like to, I need to go increase my chops somewhere else before I step up into something like this. But whatever happens, the reason you're thinking of those things, like if you try to bury that, your mind has a funny way of getting back at you by when you do those things.
I think that's so true. I think that I really like you articulate this really well, but I really like, and that really resonates with me, this idea of like when you have this thought or this feeling or something that you're just, that's kind of gnawing at you, like your mind or the universe or whatever it is has a way of like, I actually think you can either choose to run toward it, like you said, or you're going to have to face it on some other terms. It's like, you can't
Yeah, yeah.
avoid it. It's going to come
Or
your
you
way.
got to do some backwards induction and rationalization about like why not going down that path is good for you.
That's interesting
But
thought. Yeah.
yeah, but if you do that, you cut off that decision. I'm going back to like game theory economics, right? Like when you cut off that decision node, you others open, but you just cut off unknown decision nodes that could lead somewhere that you would never otherwise be exposed to. You're
Interesting.
minimizing
Yeah.
exposure. You're minimizing exposure and shrinking the canvas if you're afraid to do things.
That's true. I like that. So we're jumping a little bit further ahead here, but I have this what you said about being afraid to do things and or not being afraid to do them. Yeah, we were having a conversation a while ago, and this thing I'm paraphrasing it, but so I want to say this, and then let's come back to your story at the point in time. But I think this lends itself really well. But you were talking about how you had some opportunity in front of you, and you're like, man, I have this opportunity in front of me. You're like, and I was thinking about it, and I wasn't sure. And I started to feel like, no, you said, not a lot gets me scared these days. But when I realized that I was even starting to get like leaning toward that direction just a little bit, I realized, oh, I got to go do that right now. Like it's like you wanted to run toward this challenge. I thought that when you said that's like, I think that's a pretty unique attribute. And I think in two ways. One, like acknowledging it that, hey, this is me. This is the person this is how I am. I got to run toward this challenge if it's the right one. But then also then doing that, like I think those are two really unique attributes. I'm not that way. Like I know I'd like to be that way, but I'm not. And so I'm just curious if that's, an attribute that you've always had or something that you've developed over time, or just, yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
And to put context to it, like just to the point that you were making, we'll catch back up there. But I was I mean, you and I knew each other back in, when we knew each other, working tech and stuff like that. But I had like a great job at Microsoft. I was a senior director. I was running all of our Air Force and Space Force business. I mean, it was almost $1 billion business. I have had really good successes there, and I had this great trajectory, right? As the at least at the time, me and one other person, the succession plan for the GM, right? Like I was one of those two people, and along came another really big tech company that we'll talk about later, and they tapped me on the shoulder, asked me to be the COO of global public sector. And I said, I wasn't even looking for a job. Number one, I would say I was pretty comfortable where I was at Microsoft at the time. Certainly I didn't know everything, but I could see a path. I was, at least what I thought in my mind, was well liked by the leadership there. I could see a path of progression. But then when I looked over that, I said, oh my gosh, that's like, I don't even know what a COO does, right? But it sounds like it's like I'm probably not qualified for that, right? And I started digging into it and like owning a P&L, right? Like and having the responsibility, which includes the risk, upside and downside of the piece of an organization, is like a publicly traded company, is a big deal, right? When I say big deal, like, oh, not a big deal, but like there's a lot of risk, right? And that risk is and I thought about where I was and I said, well, you might fail, you may not. There's unknown unknowns. I'm sure just hell going to give it everything I got. But if I stay here and wait to learn that lesson about owning that amount of risk, I may need to be here for another 20 years. And because where I was, to own a P&L, be responsible for financial decisions and everything from headcount to like all the things that encompass that. I was so many levels away from that at Microsoft, and I'm not saying that I may or may not have got there, but to get to that pressure cooker, which is where diamonds are made, where you learn the most, right? That's Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot, a great book to know by Admiral James Stockdale. But to get to that pressure cooker would take a while. And so I said, I said, how much am I going to learn in my next job? A little bit, not too much. It's not much more. Actually, I think I had like, less decision authority, like even at the next level. I go, man, it would take me to get up there. That's where the risk exposure really is. Sure, you can, I could not make my number. I had like 18 direct reports, a bunch of AEs running around. Like but I had a big chunk of the business. And I said, okay, yeah, let's go do it. Let's go figure it. Like, let's sink or swim. Like that, I don't know how to do that. Let's do it. And that's kind of was our discussion.
This was a short clip from the 4Fs podcast where I sit down with founders, veterans, and executives, world-class experts that you won't hear on every other show, to talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal reinvention. For the full conversation and more context, tap the link in the description or search 4Fs podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you're enjoying these shorter episodes, make sure to follow along so you don't miss tomorrow's clip.
Welcome to the 4Fs with Jeff.